Disgraced hip-hop legend Sean Diddy Combs continues to make headlines in the wake of his sex trafficking arrest 2 weeks ago. Since his arrest in New York City, more accusers have come forward alleging the Bad Boy founder sexually assaulted them. But a law firm in Texas says they have more alleged victims in the triple-digit numbers. Houston-based firm, the Buzbee law firm, claims more than 100 people have come forward with allegations they were sexually assaulted by Diddy and his associates. Attorney Tony Buzbee of Buzbee Law Firm made the claim last week on his firm's Instagram page. According to Buzbee, the acts allegedly took place at hotels, private homes, and at Diddy's freak-off parties. The freak-offs have been at the center of the government's case against the mogul. According to Diddy's federal indictment, the sex acts known as freak-offs went on for hours and even days, and Diddy allegedly produced, directed, and recorded the encounters for his own pleasure. The freak-offs allegedly involved multiple sex workers and often involved drugs including ketamine, ecstasy, and GHB, which according to prosecutors, Diddy distributed to the victims to keep them obedient and compliant. According to the indictment, the freak-offs often occurred in hotels, and Diddy and members of his staff facilitated the freak-offs by booking the hotel rooms and stocking them with supplies, including drugs, baby oil, lubricant, extra linens, and lighting. According to the indictment, the Bad Boy founder allegedly threatened victims' careers and livelihoods if they resisted participating in the freak-offs. After federal agents raided his homes in March, they recovered items including baby oil, lubricant, AR-15s with defaced serial numbers, and drugs. According to court documents, members of Diddy's entourage often carried guns, and the producer allegedly used a firearm to intimidate and threaten others, including victims and witnesses to his abuse. According to attorney Tony Buzbee, the individuals they are representing, which include men and women, many were minors when the abuse occurred. In his statement, Buzbee wrote, "Some of these brave individuals reported the incidents to police, others did not. While at this time we don't know the full extent of the claims," Buzbee went on to write, "each individual story is gut-wrenching and heartbreaking." He wrote, "The violations against this group of individuals are mind-boggling and can only be described as debauchery and depravity exacted by powerful people against minors and the weak." Initially, when Buzbee first came forward with the sexual assault claims against Diddy and his associates, he said his firm was representing more than 50 people, but that number has since doubled when his law firm encouraged other victims to come forward. At this time, Buzbee has yet to file a formal lawsuit on behalf of more than the 100 alleged victims. The embattled producer, even though locked up, still faces nearly a dozen lawsuits already, most recently from another woman in Harris County who accused Diddy and his bodyguard of drugging, raping her, and recording the assault in 2001 when she was 25 years old. Talia Graves claimed she was dating an employee of Diddy's at the time, and he leveraged that relationship to isolate her. She said she learned Diddy recorded the crime and shared it to others to degrade and humiliate her. That lawsuit came a week after Diddy was indicted on charges of racketeering conspiracy, sex trafficking, and transportation to engage in prostitution. Since his arrest, the hip-hop producer has denied any and all wrongdoing and has pleaded not guilty to the crimes. But 2 federal judges have since denied his bail, and he'll remain in federal detention until his trial. This is a great time to bring on Texas-based criminal defense attorney Bridget Williams. Bridget, always so great to see you. Now, a law firm in Houston says more than 100 people have come forward to them with allegations of sexual assault against Diddy and his associates. What's your reaction, especially given that huge number?
It is such a huge number of women and people who are stating that they were sexually assaulted. So it's a massive amount of people. My first thoughts are whenever a federal crime is brought against a person, it's not because the federal government has a minute amount of information. They have an overwhelming amount of information to present against this person. There's probably been years of investigatory work that has gone into place in order to bring these indictment charges. An indictment brings just knowledge to the person. The purpose of an indictment is to notify the person of what they are being charged. So they don't have to lay out all the evidence in an indictment. The sole purpose is just to notify of what they are being charged with. So, with that being said, as time progresses, I just expect more and more evidence to come to the surface. So, we've seen some things already, but I can only imagine what else will be coming to the surface as this progresses.
And we do just want to kind of clarify that the alleged victims that have come forward are not a part of the federal indictment. Now, the firm also claims that many of the alleged victims were minors when the assault occurred. What are your thoughts on that?
It's definitely heartbreaking to hear that individuals who were minors, they had this happen to them. It's heartbreaking to have any person, an adult or a minor, to state that this is what happened to them, a sexual assault matter. When we think of it from a legal standpoint, though, we have the statute of limitations here in Texas for sexual assault varies from a criminal offense and from a civil standpoint. So, on a criminal side, an individual who states that they've been sexually assaulted as a minor, they do not have a statute of limitations to bring forth a criminal case. So, at any time, they can bring forth a criminal case of sexual assault. However, on the civil side, when we're talking about a civil case, then if the offense happened when they were a minor, then they have 30 years to bring forth a civil suit against the person who they are saying that caused this sexual assault case.
And there's always this debate of why victims don't come forward when things happen to them. But looking back on these lawsuits that Diddy has is facing, there seems to be this pattern of intimidation from Diddy. Do you think that attributed to them being the alleged victims in this case, not wanting to come forward before his arrest last week or 2 weeks ago?
Absolutely. I think that that is always a key factor when we talk about alleged victims in sexual assault cases. There's always a matter of they feel intimidated or they don't feel safe or they don't feel enough confidence to face their accusers, because those individuals in a criminal matter, they may be asked to testify in a trial setting. They may be asked to give a statement that will go into evidence and discovery that goes to the defense counsel, and the defendant may be able to read those statements, right? So they have to get to a point where they feel confident enough, and safe enough to come forward to bring their case. And that's one of the reasons why the statute of limitations on the civil case is for such a long time, and why there is no statute of limitations for sexual assault against a child.
And why do you think that Buzbee law firm hasn't filed a lawsuit yet with the claims?
Right now, Diddy is facing the federal case in New York. Federal cases are always going to have precedent over any type of state law matters, especially when they're of this magnitude, right? So Diddy's facing three federal charges at this time period, one of them being racketeering. Racketeering is a case that is a very hard charge to prove. And so there's a lot of underlying crimes that will go into proving the racketeering case on the federal level. If the federal prosecutors can move forward with that case and they are successful there, it's going to be much easier for the state prosecutors to move forward on their criminal cases, because they may be able to insert some of that information into their trial setting if they have it. I would say that because they have that authority or a precedent to be able to move forward first there, I would be waiting if I was Buzbee as well, moving forward on the civil case and moving forward with trying to do criminal case as well.
And I'm interested to know, as far as the racketeering conspiracy and that being kind of harder to prove, why do you think that is? Because to me, in my mind, I'm always like, well, they can just like follow the money essentially. But what are your thoughts on why racketeering conspiracy might be a little harder to prove in this case?
Racketeering is always going to be a hard case to prove, and that's because it is the elements for racketeering is pretty much an organized crime involving schemes to produce or elicit illegal financial gain for that organization. So there have to be series of other crimes, of other specific examples of organized crime in order to prove the racketeering. And so that is going to be several instances that have to be proved, not just one time. It has to be multiple times. Multiple crimes have to be proven. So that could be bribery, arson, sexual assault. Several different crimes have to be proven in order to move forward in a RICO or a racketeering case.
And it's interesting too, because Diddy has denied all wrongdoing on previous lawsuits when it comes to his alleged sexual misconduct and denied all wrongdoing in his federal case. But with more than 100 people now coming forward to allege sexual assault, not just by Diddy, but his associates as well too, how do you expect Diddy's attorneys to react to all of this?
It's gonna be tough. It's gonna be tough because again, whenever we talk about these individuals coming forward, one person we may say, okay, well, we have a case where we is when your word against the other person's word. But there's so much overwhelming evidence in this particular case. Sometimes it's the defense's job to mitigate or reduce the damages or reduce the sentencing or prison time as much as possible. Sometimes that can be a strategy. In this particular case, Diddy is, like you stated, denying all wrongdoing at all. So I'm just going to be looking for what's going to be presented in the trial setting. Because right now we have some evidence, but we just don't know what will all be presented in the trial, and what evidence that Diddy's defense counsel has in order to produce also. So that'll be very pertinent in order when he talks about his defense strategy.
And speaking of defense strategy, what do you think Diddy's defense attorneys will be using kind of going forward with this trial? And I'm saying that in the sense of what type of strategy do you think they'll be using beyond that these freak offs that had happened, in hotel rooms, possibly at his mansions, were all consensual acts. What other type of kind of defense do you think they'll use beyond this was just consensual?
That's a tough one, especially when we talk about the offenses that occur with minors, because minors cannot give consent, and so we that's going to be a very tough defense whenever we are discussing the issues that went on with minors. So that one's going to be a tough one. But with the adults, individuals who are over the age of 18 years old, I think that's going to be the main defense strategy is consent. You provided consent, you were there, you were of your own free will to be there. And so, again, that will be the evidence that will be coming out in the trial setting. We'll just have to see exactly what they'll be putting forward. We won't know what their strategy that they can be using. We only have the evidence that the prosecutions the prosecutor has brought forward at this time. So I think as that continues to develop, we may see more and more things, and then we can say, okay, well, this is how they will calculate a defense strategy once we are privy to more information.
And what are your thoughts about the prosecution in their case, kind of going about this? Can they use any of the claims against Diddy, including these lawsuits and possibly these more than 100 alleged victims? Can they use any of that going forward in their case?
They can try to, right? So we have different evidence parameters that they are not allowed to bring in any what we call prior bad acts, but that would be up to defense counsel to make objections to. A good prosecutor is going to try to insert that information into any trial. However, it's the defense's job to bring up that prior bad acts objection. Generally, they'll do that prior to the trial setting and outside the view of the jury, and it'll just be in front of the court. And the judge will make a ruling on if that will be acceptable to bring into evidence, to bring into a trial, and if it will be tainting to a jury, if it is more damaging or not to the jury to hear that evidence. So that's completely up to a judge to decide.
And one thing that always kind of sticks out to me in this particular case is that, the federal government alleges that Diddy didn't act alone. He kind of was the head of his associates who kind of acted on his behalf. But now, with some of these lawsuits that are coming out, there are other people in Diddy's camp that have been kind of named in these lawsuits as far as either being perpetrators or knowing about Diddy's alleged crimes. What are your thoughts on just the whole aspect of his associates also being kind of involved in this? And I'm not talking about like celebrities who have attended his parties or anything like that, but people in Diddy's camp who have also kind of been um, accused of also kind of participating in these illegal acts.
Those individuals who are being accused of these illegal actions, I feel like they will go towards the racketeering case. That is just another way to build that there was an organized crime, a scheme that was going on this entire time in order to create additional illegal financial gain for the organized crime. So all of those individuals being named, those names will come out what they did, what Diddy's involvement was with them and what they did, and their involvement in Diddy and what he did. uh, all those things will come out in trial. And so I think that goes to moving forward with the racketeering case. That goes to proving the racketeering case. So that would be something that I'm looking to the prosecution in their racketeering case in chief to be bringing out those individuals.
It's also been interesting that Diddy's attorney, Mark Agnifilo, has been kind of adamant that his client will take the stand in his own trial. What are your thoughts on that? Given, isn't it criminal defense attorney 101? Don't put your client on the stand. So I just kind of want to know what your thoughts are about if Diddy takes the stand, what that could look like, and if this is something you would advise him to do.
As defense attorneys, it's our job to advise the client. And so we give them advice and tell them, okay, well, I don't think this is a good idea of you to take the stand because this can happen, this can happen. All of these negative things can happen. However, it's the client, is their right if they choose to move forward, it's their case. If they want to move forward with taking the stand, then it's their case. They have the choice to do that or not. Now, if I was Diddy's counsel, I would make sure that I have warned him, and I'm sure he has warned him of all of the implications that can come along with someone who is taking the stand as the defendant. The prosecution has the right at that time to question him about any and everything at that time. And so it's not at a good it's not a good position to be in, I would say, for Diddy to take the stand at this time with the information that we currently know. Again, as this continues to move forward and additional information comes about, then it may be something that may be to his interest to take the stand. But at this current time, with the information that we have, I don't think that it's a good idea for him.
All right, Bridget Williams, I always appreciate your insight. Before I sign you off, anything else about this case that you would like to add?
The individuals here in Texas who are stating now that they are bringing forth claims against Diddy for sexual assault, they're fighting their own battles. They're going to have their own battles to fight against Diddy, separate from the individuals in New York, and that's because again, their battle here is going to be fighting against the statute of limitations here in Texas on the civil and the criminal side. And so they're going to have to work with their attorney, and that attorney is going to be looking at when these offenses occur, or when did they say that they did occur. And that's how he'll know if he's able to move forward on a civil case or a criminal case against Diddy here in Texas.
All right, Bridget Williams, thank you again so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Sean Diddy Combs remains behind bars. However, his attorneys have filed an appeal. Combs is slated to appear in court again next week on October 9th. Reporting for Law and Crime, I'm Elizabeth Millner.